Awesome. All right, so we have this new series called Resilient. Maybe you had the kind of week where you didn't feel very resilient this week. But yet God positioned us to have resilience. He gives us resilience. He wants us to step into that. So this whole series, my goal in this whole series is to help give you some skills to allow God to build some resiliency in your life. Okay? And last week we talked about the fact that there is this thing called a river of life that God wants to fill us with. Like Jesus talked about it, a spring that bubbles over. Like when we're filled with that, like he said, you will never be thirsty again. So it's this picture of this overflowing water. So tonight we're going to look at this part of being resilient, and a key part of being a resilient person, and how we're defined by being a resilient person, and what is it that's on the inside of us that is part of that, what determines that. Okay, so I'm going to start off a little bit different tonight. I'm going to show you a picture, okay, this first picture up here, okay? How many of you have seen something like that on your phone? Anybody? Ever seen that? Okay. What does that mean when you see something like that? Give me some feedback. What's it mean? Maybe a tornado. Maybe a really bad thunderstorm. We had a bad thunderstorm on Wednesday, right? Went through really fast. Like when you see something like that on your phone or whatever, you know something's coming. Right? It's getting closer. Like I watch the weather a lot, like when we're about ready to have a Friday night. Like, because I have to cancel it like at about 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and I have to make a judgment call because it might be pouring down rain by the time we do it or whatever, right? Okay, so there's that. How do you know, though? Like, tell me, how do you know that there's a storm coming from this? The radar? Right? You know... Like the red stuff is really bad, right? The green stuff, not too bad. But you know, it does, doesn't it, right? Okay, so Hannah, my youngest, and I, this was, how many years ago was this? This was probably 20 years ago. We were on our way back to Bowling Green. I used to live in Bowling Green, okay? So we were on 25. And we were just getting off of 75 on the 25, heading towards Bowling Green, and the sky looked like this. I'm going to show you the next picture. This is what the sky looked like, okay? When you see these kind of clouds, these are called mamadas. When you see these kind of clouds, something intense with the weather is about to take place. You might not have a tornado, but you're going to have one heck of a thunderstorm. This is what it looked like. Okay, so by the time we got to, by the time we got to 5 Point Road, on 25, 5 Point Road, we hit a hailstorm hit. And it blew our car almost off the road. And I remember Hannah and I were in there, and I was gripping the car, and she was screaming, and all of this hail is, all over the car, whatever, dented the car like crazy. Luckily, it didn't smash our windows. I was surprised at that. But I knew that when I saw those clouds, something was coming. It's going to happen, okay? When I grew up, I was little. We lived in Nebraska. Nebraska is known as Tornado Alley, okay? And so they're usually, like every summer, we have a sky that will look like this. Let me show you the next picture. It's green. Like it turns green. And anytime when you see that, when you see green like that, that's actually refraction happening from hail with the sun. That's how that happens, like big hailstorms or whatever. But it's also, it can be a precursor for a tornado. Right? What's that? Yeah. Yep. So we knew, like when I was growing up in Nebraska, we knew when we saw something like that, something's coming, okay? I want you to listen what Jesus says in Luke chapter 12. Okay, we're going to go to Luke chapter 12, starting at 54. It says this, "Then Jesus turned to the crowd and said, 'When you see clouds beginning to form in the west, you say, here comes a shower, and you are right. When the south wind blows, you say, today will be a scorcher, and it is.' He says, you fools, you know how to interpret the weather signs of the earth and sky, but you don't know how to interpret the present times." Jesus is basically saying, you're so smart about interpreting the weather. Why can't you use those same skills in determining what is really taking place right now? He's basically saying, you don't have a clue. So let me ask you a question. Okay, now you can give me some feedback with this question. What are some of the things that are taking place in our country right now? Just give me some things like you've seen in the news. What are some things taking place? Yeah. Disease. What else? What's that? Okay, corrupt leadership. What else? Yeah. Distrust. Right? Division. Right? I mean, there's lots and lots of things that are taking place right now, right? Right? In our country, okay. So as you look at all the things that are happening in our country, whatever, and collectively, what does it mean that is coming? Like, as you look at all of that, what does it mean is coming? Like, so Jesus is saying, okay, listen, you can interpret all that stuff about the weather, but here's the problem. Like, you're not paying attention to the truth about the present time. You're not paying attention. Where do most people get their information these days? What's that? Social media, right? Like a lot of people will get their present information from social media, which is crazy. It's crazy because social media companies are held by private owners with strong personal opinions on what should and shouldn't get airtime. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, those are private companies. And they're going to decide what they think should get airtime or not. Okay, let me ask you this. Have you ever taken the news apps off your phone? Have you ever done that? You're like, I did. Right now, the only news app I think I have is 13 Weather, which I have to go a couple more clicks on there to get a recap of the news, right? So I have to kind of do some extra stuff to get there. But that's it. Because, okay, listen, the reason why I took it off is because I was so tired of everyone else telling me what I needed to get upset about, whether it was true or not. I was tired of it. Because here's the truth. We are all part of a story that's being written. It's the story that God is telling. We're part of it. Despite what the world shouts at us, God is writing a story, and his story is the story of the world. We're the story. And in any story, like I like good books, in any story, at the end, there's a climax at the end. Right? There's a final chapter that ties everything together at the end, and usually that's when everything starts to make sense in a good book. Right? So, in this present story that's being written right now, no matter what the media outlets say, God is writing it. God is writing it. And in the book of Ephesians, Paul, I want you to listen to this. Paul is giving us a glimpse into just who is in control. Okay, listen to this. Ephesians chapter 1, starting in verse 20. All this energy issues from Christ. God raised him from death and set him on a throne in deep heaven, in charge of running the universe. Everything from galaxies to governments, no name and no power exempt from his rule. And not just for time being, but forever. He is in charge of it all. He's the final word on everything. At the center of all this, Christ rules the church. The church, you see, is not peripheral to the world. The world is peripheral to the church. The church is Christ's body in which he speaks and acts, by which he fills everything with his presence. Okay, so I know what you're thinking when I'm reading this. You're like, Pastor Pat, do you know what's going on? Really? You know what's going on in our country and in the world. Really? Have you read the Facebook posts? Did you see what's blowing up on Twitter? Really? Okay, let me tell you this. Do you know what was going on in Paul's day when he wrote that? Okay, so the church in Paul's day when it was this little tiny insignificant dot on the political, social, economic map of Rome. Little tiny dot. Insignificant. Okay? And at that time in history, it had no influence, no track record, and no indication that it would ever last. When he wrote this. Okay? And yet Paul, he in his audacity says that Jesus is the one who ultimately holds all the cards and all the authority for all eternity. Okay? So what do we know about Rome? After a couple hundred years, Rome was gone. No influence. The church remained. It's still here. Right? Presidents have come and gone. Right? Each one bringing their own agendas. But Paul makes it very clear. Jesus is in charge. He's in charge. When Luke was writing the story of the beginning of the church in the book of Acts, he said this too. Listen to what he says. In Acts 17, verse 27, he says, his purpose was for the nations to seek after God and perhaps feel their way towards him and find him, though he is not far from any of us. And then he says this in verse 28, in him we live and move and exist. We live and move and exist. Live, when he talks about live, that's this Greek word zao, and it's a picture of physical and spiritual life. So he's saying in Jesus, your physical life, Jesus is attached to that. Oh yeah, he's also an integral part of your spiritual life. Because see, as a Christ follower, we have this crazy ability to interact in this physical body, but we also have this other ability in order to interact with God, because now we're spiritually connected to God. So we have these two of these things going on here, okay? The word move. The word move. Where we get the word kinetics, it literally means to stir the pot, which means to create. Because of Jesus, we have this ability in and through us to actually create and make a difference in somebody else's life. Because of Jesus, we have the ability to do that. Okay? And then he uses the word exist. We live and we move and we exist. It's esman. And it means my being. It's like this equation. It's like my being times my hope plus the gospel equals me, a picture of the present and the future. So it's like we exist. It's my being times hope plus the gospel. And now guess what? Now I have meaning, purpose on why I exist. Because of Jesus, guess what? Now I know why I exist. Okay? So here's the reality about people. This is the one thing for tonight. It's this. Resilient people know who is really in charge. Resilient people know who is really in charge. The government's not in charge. Right? The governments are going to change. You know how many times this thing has changed? I mean, I'm 62. Do you know how many presidents that we've gone through? How many times they've changed agendas? How many times people have rioted? How many times people have gotten upset? How many times that people are, oh my gosh, it's going to change. But Jesus wants us to know he's in charge. Not only do they have a picture of who's in charge, they have a picture of the end of the story, but they're aware of the present chapters that are being written. Okay? Anybody here, did you guys ever watch Lord of the Rings? Do you like Lord of the Rings movies? Did you ever watch that? Okay? Oh, it's a great series, Lord of the Rings. It starts off at this little place called the Shire where these human beings called the hobbits live. They're like that tall, and it's a place where life is good. It's just good. Like when you see pictures of the Shire, it's green and lush, and they love growing stuff, and it's just a quiet place. And then this guy named Frodo ends up with this ring that he has to destroy because it's pure evil, and so he starts off on a journey. So he starts on a journey, and things go from bad to worse, and he actually ends up like at the gates of hell itself. Huge gates, the gates of hell itself. So and at this point, Frodo and his friend is with him. They know they can't go back to the Shire where it's good. They just can't go back. They have to go forward in order for them to get back to the party. We have to go forward. Because we know what the end is. Right? We have to go forward. Right? So Jesus wants us to have this clarity in how we view what is happening right now around us before the end of the story takes place. He wants us to have clarity in the midst of uncertainty. Because see, resilient people, they understand. Yes, things are a little nutty right here, but that's not really who's in charge. God's in charge. He's in charge. Listen to this in Luke chapter 17. Gives us a glimpse. This is Jesus talking. Starting in verse 26, he says, "When the Son of Man returns, it will be like it was in Noah's day. In those days, the people enjoyed banquets and parties and weddings right up to the time Noah entered his boat and the flood came and destroyed them all." Okay, so there's this one, as I was going through this, one of the theologians that I read, he said this. He said, the expression eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage doesn't describe certain sins. No, it merely depicts a society living blissfully in the moment and planning for the future. He's not describing an apocalyptic thing happening. Listen to verse 28. "And the world will be as it was in the days of Lot. People went about their daily business, eating and drinking, buying and selling, farming and building." Very normal. "Until the morning Lot left Sodom. Then fire and burning sulfur rained down from heaven and destroyed them all." And then he says this. Listen to this. Yes. "It will be business as usual right up to the day when the Son of Man is revealed." Business as usual. Okay, can I just say this? Can I just say this? We're not going to experience some kind of zombie apocalypse before Jesus comes back. We're not. You don't throw parties and have weddings and everything like that when there's brutal chaos happening all over. No. Jesus said it's going to be business as usual. Actually, things might be pretty good. When Jesus decides, it's time, it's over, hey, everybody out of the pool, come on. Right? It's going to be business as usual when he comes back. See, resilient people, we understand that. We understand exactly what's being painted here, right? Because we know resilient people, my resiliency, your resiliency grows as we fully embrace who's really in charge of the final outcome. God is. Jesus, he made it very clear, Jesus is the one who's in control. Jesus is. Okay? So here's my question for you tonight. Who's framing your story? Who's framing your story? Is the government framing your story? Are you letting the division that's happening in the world frame your story? Are you letting Facebook frame your story? Are you letting what's going on Twitter frame your story? Are you letting social media frame your story? See, resilient people, we're not going to depend on that to frame my story. I have a story that's being written, and it's being written by God himself. Period. He's going to continue to write the story because he's the one who's in charge. And there will be a day when this story is over. It will happen when God says it's time. So resilient people know, okay, I know there's chaos going on around me and all of those things, but I know, hold on, I know who's in charge. And I'm going to put my trust in him as the author. In Hebrews it says Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith. He's the author. He's going to finish the story. Right? So I said that I'm always going to have some kind of skill. I want you to pull this out of your program jacket. Pull this out, okay? I want you, okay, we're going to go through this together. I'm going to have Steve play some music in the background, and I'm just going to lead this. This is Psalm 23, but we're going to unpack this. Okay? Because I want you to take this, and I want you, after we're done doing this, I want you to claim this every day this week. Every day this week. When you get up, I want you to go through this. Okay, but I'm going to lead you through this. This is a skill that will help you to get God's perspective. You need God's perspective. Not man's perspective. You need God's perspective. All right, so we're just going to quiet our hearts here for a second. And we're going to do this kind of in a prayerful way. I don't know if you ever pray through Scripture, but this is kind of an example of how to pray through Scripture. How do you do that? Like instead of just reading it, you're going to pray through it. You're going to personalize it. We have to personalize this. Okay? So we're going to start off with verse 1. We're just going to be quiet for a second. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing." Because see, Jesus is still in charge. He's so deeply involved in my life and the world. He's guiding, and he's leading, and he's providing. He is so involved. And then David says, "He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He refreshes my soul." See, God restores my weary heart. That's that river of life. He gives me resilience as I choose to follow him. He fills my soul with resilience. And then he says, he guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Oh, please, please, don't get baited. Don't get baited into all the social drama. Let God lead you each and every day. Don't get baited into that. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Yes, we're in crazy, crazy times, aren't we? But the truth is, God is still protecting me and comforting me, and I am not navigating this on my own. He is still your shepherd. You prepare a table for me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. This is a picture of abundance. Like God has a feast of goodness for you. He has a feast of goodness. Even in rough times. And he can fill those famished cravings for life to be good again. And then he says, surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. See, your reality, my reality, is not determined by pandemics and politics or anything else. I live in God. He lives in me. His goodness is with me today, and my future is absolutely secure and wondrous. That's the truth. That's the truth. In our sports camp, we had a slide up there where it had the word truth and the word trust. And I told the kids, I said, you can trust the truth. You can trust the truth. This is something like, if you gain God's perspective, there's a very good chance that your resiliency is going to grow. You get God's perspective on what's going on in the world, you look at his perspective. You put your faith in him as the author. Your resiliency will grow. That's my prayer for you. So take this. Start off every day praying through this, okay? Every day praying through this. All right, those of you on Facebook Live, thank you for joining us tonight. We love our Facebook Live audience. You guys are our heroes. We love having you be part of this. If you've listened to our podcast, I almost said podcast. I got social media on my mind. If you have watched our Facebook Live services before, I want to encourage you to become a part of our ministry by giving. We do a lot during the summer. We're having 3 sports camps. We just did one this last week. And our finances get very, very, very tight during the summertime. God always provides through his people. So if you want to give an offering towards TNC, that would be great. You can do it through the Tithely app or through our website, or you can send a check. And so thank you again for joining us. We love you guys, and we'll see you next week. The rest of us, we're going to